everyone, and welcome to Thorough Newspaper Analysis, which is brought to you by LawSeco. So, today we will be discussing two articles. Both are from the Indian Express. The first article is titled as Plugging the Privacy Gaps. So, this article talks about the urgent need and the importance of implementation of the Personal Data Protection Bill, which even till date is under consideration by the Select Committee of the Parliament. So, what are the various and most important provisions of the bill, and how will it benefit the entire system of data protection has been discussed in this article. And the second one is titled as New Investments in Science. So this is regarding the International Science Fair that is going on in Lucknow right now, and also that what is the importance of investing in the field of science and what steps have been taken by this STIP, that is the Science, Technology and Innovation Policy of India. And thirdly, we have the News in Flash column, wherein we have the important news for a prelims exam. So if you're also preparing for judicial services examination, you can have a look at the Lord of the Courses, which is the judiciary test prep course from LawSeco. So it is a very amazing course wherein you'll get all the classes for your judicial preparation. The link to this course is there in the description box below, and also you can download free study material from the landing page. We're also excelling into courses like CLAT, All India Bar Exam, SEBI, etc. You can have a look at them too. So let's see what is the multiple choice question from yesterday's discussion. Who was the chief guest in Republic Day 2019? Your options are Donald Trump, Jigme Khesar Namgyel Wangchuk, Cyril Ramaphosa, or none of the above. You can write down your answer in the comment section below. So this is the descriptive question from today's discussion. Critically analyze the provisions of Personal Data Protection Bill, which seeks to update the currently non-existent standards for privacy and consent. So with this, let's start the discussion for today's first article, which talks about the National Data Protection Legislation. So in the recent years, the question of privacy has drawn attention from all sectors of the globe. And as we know that in India also, it has been recognized as a fundamental right now, as a fundamental right to privacy under the case of K.S. Puttaswamy versus Union of India. Now, one thing that we need to understand here is that it was highly celebrated, and we all were really we were so happy about the fact that now we in India have recognized a right to privacy as one of the fundamental rights. But one thing that we should also be realizing at the same time is that are we, in the real sense or in the practical sense, are we really equipped enough and are we ready to really exercise privacy as a fundamental right? Well, maybe this is something that we need to think upon, because we only currently have it as a right. We don't really have a proper legislation also in our country that can protect it as a fundamental right. And that is the legislation which we are talking about here, is the Personal Data Protection Bill 2019, which is still under the consideration of the Parliamentary Committee. So one thing that we need to know is that for the real exercise of right to privacy as a fundamental right, it is very much desirable that we also have in hand a complete formulated legislation that protects the data that we have in the real sense. So if we talk about the data protection laws, over 80 countries have passed national laws protecting the collection and use of their citizens' data by companies and the government. Now, another thing that we need to understand here is that what data are we talking about? So it can be the personal data as well as the non-personal data. But when it comes to keeping more secure, then it is the personal data that needs to be protected from any kind of misuse. Now, personal data can be any information, as the name itself is suggesting, that gives the idea of a personal identity, like our name, our address, phone number, email ID, the religion we belong to, or anything like that, is something that gives real personal information about ourselves. And if we talk about the non-personal data, then it would be data something like, for example, there are approximately 1 crore cases of COVID-19 in India. Now, which person is actually suffering from COVID-19 is not disclosed in this data. So this definitely is a data, but it is of non-personal nature. Or for example, if we say that 23% of people in India have gained the seroprevalence, or the serological prevalence, what we were talking about in the COVID-19. Now, this again gives a non-personal information as to this is the total number of population that has gained the seroprevalence, but which individual has or has not been given in this data. So there are lesser chances of any kind of misuse, and rather there are minimal chances of any kind of misuse of the non-personal data. But when it comes to the personal data, like the kind of data we have in our Aadhaar cards, like our name, our address, the name of our father, the phone numbers, and every such thing is the personal data. So that is why India's Personal Data Protection Bill 2019 is being considered by a parliamentary committee, and it is very much, it is being desired now that this bill should be promulgated in the real sense, and it should be brought into force. So huge commercial and political consequence for India, like in the Ernst and Young, emerging tech in India will create, according to them, it will create $1 trillion in the economic value by 2025. So as we know that there are a lot of startups that depend upon data, artificial intelligence, there are various commercial and other technological ideas which need data as the basic raw material to function. Now, in this scenario, definitely it is desirable that one person who is furnishing his or her data to any particular company, that person is given a secure affirmation that his data would not be misused. And for that, definitely we need to have a formulated law, and that would be the Personal Data Protection Bill 2000, whenever it is promulgated or whenever it is actually brought in the formal sense. So that is why a huge commercial and political consequence, or a benefit can be gained through data protection once this law comes into a complete force. And according to the Ernst and Young, it has the potential to create $1 trillion in the economic value by just 2025, that is just in the coming 4 or 5 years. So let's discuss about the bill. So this bill establishes number of conditions for companies to follow. Now, how at all this bill will actually help the people, or the ones who are furnishing their data to the companies, to make sure that their data would be kept safe, is that there are a lot of conditions for the companies who are collecting the data, and they need to follow these conditions. Like, requires digital firms to obtain permission from the users. So firstly, if at all they want to collect any data from the users, they have to take the permission of the users. And even if they want to propagate this data to any further service, then also they have to seek the permission of the users, that if or not they allow for it. Then it declares that users who provide data are the owners of their own data, that is, they have the right to be forgotten. Now, this is a very beautiful concept that will actually change the entire thing, and it will really make the people furnishing their data as the real owners feel like the real owners of their data. That firstly, these companies would clearly declare that the people who will be furnishing this data, who are known as the data principals. So basically what happens is that the one person who is furnishing his personal data to someone is called the data principal, and that someone, now be it the government, the company, or any kind of entity, that makes sure that this data is used in the best manner and it is not at all misused, is called the data custodian, because obviously the data is in their custody. But yet again, the data is in their custody and the real owners would still be the data principals, and then they also would have the right to be forgotten. Now, this is a very amazing right which would actually give the real sense of ownership. Like how? Basically, it is at the it is at the decision of the data principal or the person furnishing the data that he can ask this company to completely delete his personal data from any kind of online existence, and thus his existence from any internet or online service will be completely vanished, which means that he enjoys his own right to be forgotten on the online services. So that is how he will be the complete, he has the complete decision making power as to he wants his data to float on the internet or any other kind of service or not, and if not, he can definitely ask the company to completely withdraw his data. But the bill does not protect individuals against Indian government. Now, this thing that needs to be really discussed and debated regarding this bill is that, where on one side the data principle get such amazing protection from the private entities and companies, we as the data principals will not be getting much of any kind of protection from any kind of government agencies or services. So the critical or sensitive personal data is accessible to government if needed to protect the national interest. Now we know that whenever there is something wherein the government wants that the people or the citizens should not just raise any kind of questions, they put forward the name of national interest. As we know that recently various apps from China were also banned just taking the name of national interest or national security. So they say that any kind of data, personal data, can be accessed by the government if at all it is there for the protection of national interest. But this again opens up the forum for various kinds of illegitimate activities as well, wherein it would be very difficult for the data principal to check his data, that where and who is using his data. And also, B.N. Sri Krishna, Justice B.N. Sri Krishna, whose committee was actually responsible for bringing and drafting the Personal Data Protection Bill, also said that such open access to the government or such government exemptions can risk creating an Orwellian state. Now, what an Orwellian state we'll just see in the next slide. And it says that no independent expert of the member of judiciary in government body is there, and thus it says that the people in the data protection authority that would be taking care of the entire thing, that the data is not misused, so on and so forth, they'll all be the people that are appointed by the central government. So this is something really difficult to believe that it will be able to function completely independently, and thus the government would not really have any effect or any kind of influence on the functioning of the DPA. Now, by Orwellian state, we mean that it is used to describe a political system in which the government tries to control every part of people's lives, similar to that described in the novel 1984 by George Orwell. And that is why this kind of draconian state is considered or called generally as the Orwellian state. Now, one example of this can be considered as the example of North Korea. Maybe not. It can be completely called as an Orwellian state or not. But yes, the state, actually the government, as in what even if we call it a government or not, so the entire dictatorship has huge control on even the personal lives of the people, and that can be a good example of Orwellian state. And it says that if the Indian government also is given so much of exemption in exercising its control over the personal data of its people, then there is a chance that an Orwellian state may be it may be constituted in India as well. With this, let's discuss the next article for the day, which talks about the Draft Science, Technology and Innovation, which is the SIT policy, also known as in short as the STIP. So this is the Science, Technology and Innovation Policy. So recently, the draft policy on science, technology and innovation was released, containing radical and progressive proposals. So basically, this policy has been released in order to inculcate the scientific temper and to develop the aspect of science, technology and innovation in our country. So the key features of this policy are, firstly, the core principles. It says that the entire system of the bringing into the scientific temper and promoting science in amongst the people. So it would be a decentralized, evidence informed, bottom up, dynamic, experts driven and inclusive policy. So it says that this policy would be decentralized. That is, we know the meaning of decentralized, that it will be functioning at different levels of the government. Evidence informed, that what it will be depending completely on statistics and whatever growth we are getting through any kind of work. Bottom up, that is, the ground level will be focused, at the first instance, and then from the ground level we'll be moving towards the upper levels. Dynamic, that is, that it can change itself from time to time. Experts driven and also inclusive, wherein we'll definitely make sure to include not only the people who already have access to good science temperament and the various facilities, but also the women in the scientific temper, and as well as people with disabilities, etc. And it will be a complete inclusive policy. Then it would be guided by the vision of positioning India among top 3 scientific superpowers in the next decade. Then it outlines the strategies to strengthen India's STI, which is science, technology and innovation ecosystem, and achieve goal of Atmanirbhar Bharat. Now, one thing that we need to understand here is that when we are thinking of becoming Atmanirbhar, then science, technology and innovation play a very important role. Now, this can be in the field of education, in the field of medicine, health, etc., security. So in all the terms, if we want to become a self-reliant India, then science, technology and innovation play a very important role. Now, in this note, I would like to add one thing, that very recently we discussed about the patent laws in India. Now, as we know that patent laws are responsible for inculcating the idea of innovation and for incentivizing the people to invent and innovate more and more. So that is why at one side where we are trying to invest more and trying to develop the science, technology and innovation ecosystem, it is equally important that we have the patent law system in India, that wherein people are not only incentivized to or they're given the right ecosystem to develop more and more innovation, rather their innovation is given more protection and recognition as well. So that is why in this regard, though the article does not really mention much about the patent laws because it was more towards the scientific science, technology and innovation policy, but it is an important point too. So this policy has proposed open science framework, free access to all publicly funded research. Now, this is a very amazing step that would be taken by this policy, that it says that all those researches in the field of science that are taking place through the public funds, like any kinds of government agencies are taking out any kind of research, any outcome result, or any kind of report. So this data would be publicly available to all the people, all the and also all the scientists, the poor ones belonging to the the village areas, or every kind of individual, and all these publicly funded research outcomes would be available at par. So this also promotes the one nation, one subscription. Now, this also is a very good step that would be taken by this entire policy, which would actually democratize science. Now, let's take for an example that there is a very good journal. For example, let's take Science or Nature. So these are all the journals, specifically if we talk about the journal Science. So there are various other journals also at the international level which are not readily available to all the individuals of our country, because the subscription fee for them is not something that everyone in our country can afford. Because as we know that many a times many scientists, they come from really poor backgrounds. A very, very bright example of this can be of Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam, who himself belonged to a poor family, but his struggles and his hard work and perseverance made him, what he actually was called as the missile man of India. But in this scenario, there are a lot of people who have scientific temperament, but still, due to the lack of resources and because they cannot really go through the knowledge that is available worldwide and at the international level, they remain devoid of various developments taking place in the science. And that is why this policy has proposed one nation, one subscription, wherein the government would be paying one at a time a subscription fee for all these important science journals, and their publishings, and every journal would be available exactly, completely free of cost for every individual of the country. So it's not that only the people belonging to any government department or any particular agency, institute, or scientist group or something would be made available with these journals. Rather, every individual, even you and I would be given the subscription free of cost from the side of government. So this is really a good step in this direction. And then the research and development institutions spend 1,500 crore per annum on subscriptions. That is the current scenario, and there is a possibility that even an amount greater than this will have to be spent for this one nation, one subscription. But obviously, the outcome of this is something that would really overpower this investment that we are making in this direction. So then about the inclusion and equity, it says that over the past 6 years, the participation of women in science and education has doubled. Then there has also been an improvement in the participation of women in the science and tech at both bachelor's and the master's degrees. But there has been no significant improvement in the doctoral level. So because there are a lot of restrictions in India, because many a times women are not even allowed to pursue a lot of higher education due to marriage and other societal, chains, we can say. So males in the doctoral level are 56%, where females are only 44%. So here is the area of or scope of the development where this policy can dwell into. And then there are various initiatives that have been taken. So the Indian version of Ethna Swan Charter, which is the global framework to support gender equality in higher education and research. So this also can bring in women as an important part in the science and technology as well. And the STIP, which is the Science, Technology and Innovation Policy, has recommended mandatory positions for excluded groups, dual recruitment policy for couples, etc. So there are various kind of reservations also that are there for women in various colleges, institutes, etc. And even for the better recruitment policy for couples who both husband and wife also are working in the same field of science. So if we take a learning from the COVID-19, so 2020, as we all know, has been a year of science for India and the world. So now, be it from various kinds of tests that were there for checking the COVID-19, if or not a person has a COVID-19, then various kinds of ventilator facilities that were available at the hospitals, the vaccine development, and various other things that were taking place. So it was all revolving around the science. So in India, the pandemic has presented an opportunity for research and development. As we know that in India also, two of our Covishield and one another vaccine are very potential vaccines at the international level as well for COVID-19, and also for academia and industry to work with a shared purpose, synergy, collaboration, and cooperation. Then about the government funding in the research and development in the field of science, then currently it is only 0.6% of our GDP, which is very less as compared to various other nations which actually spend 1.5 to 3% of their GDP in the research and development. So inadequate private sector investment, which is less than even 40%. So we need to enhance that as well. We need to encourage the private sector also to come into the field of science. And other countries have the private investments around 70%. So India has to compete on that side as well. So then if we talk about the STIP recommendations, there are the expansion of the STO funding landscape at center and state levels. So there are various things that we need to, we can develop in this. And also if we remember that even one of our fundamental duties, which is a fundamental duty in H, which is in there in clause H, also says that it would be the duty of every individual to develop the scientific temper, humanism, and the spirit of inquiry as well. So that is why it is upon us also that we should pay a lot of attention towards science, and not that any other field of art, culture, and other things are less important. But yes, science also plays a very, very important role in strengthening the nation at the international level as well as the national level as well. With this, let's see what do we have for news in flash today. The Supreme Court to study anti-conversion laws. So the Supreme Court has agreed to examine constitutional validity of the laws enacted by states such as UP, Uttarakhand, and that criminalize religious conversion via marriage and mandate prior official clearance. Now, as we know that Madhya Pradesh also has Himachal Pradesh and Madhya Pradesh also have brought this anti-conversion law. So this bench will be led by Chief Justice of India, Sharade Bobde. And second, Saudi and Qatar restored ties. So 3 years after the Saudi Arabia-led coalition of 4 Middle Eastern countries cut ties with Qatar, the Saudi foreign minister has announced that Riyadh, which is the capital of Saudi Arabia, and its 3 Arab allies would restore full ties with Doha, which is the capital of Qatar. So in 2017, Saudi led an Arab transport blockade against Qatar, ostensible to punish Doha for its ties with radical Islamist groups. Now, as we know that there are mostly many a times various kinds of turmoil they go amongst the nations or between the nations in the Middle East. So at least for the Saudi and Qatar, it is seeing a resolving state. So this was all for the day. We hope it was a good and informative session for you all. If you wish to download the PDF for today's slides, you can join our Telegram group. The link to this group is there in the description box below. Also, you can visit our website for any other information. Thank you so much.